Well, joining us now from Washington is John Sitilides. He's a geopolitical strategist at Trilogy Advisors. And John, I just want to start by looking at some of these primary votes. Is there one or two races in specific that you think are really interesting to look at from both sides of the aisle about where the two big parties are trending?
Unfortunately, I don't think we see any real bellwether races today. I think what we really see happening is a major contest between primary voters in the Republican and Democratic parties nationwide over a series of primary elections the last few weeks and in the weeks ahead that really involve highly motivated voters, both those on the Democratic side that detest Donald Trump and everything he stands for, and those on the right in the Republican Party who absolutely love what he's doing to defend what they see as American sovereignty and political culture. And what will be interesting is where the independents go come the general election based on how leftist the Democratic Party candidates are and how Trumpian the Republican candidates will be.
John, it's hard to separate any kind of vote on this day without, from the wider context, obviously, those extremely controversial policy of separating migrant families that is now sort of in limbo, awaiting a new bill in Congress. How much do you think that's going to play into how people are going to vote in those 7 states today?
I think it'll have some impact. I don't think they're as controversial for most everyday Americans as they are for the media and, say, for voters on each coast. I think most voters are motivated mostly by the increase in take-home pay. 90% of American workers right now have a sense that they have higher take-home pay in 2018 as a result of the tax reform that was heralded by President Trump the end of last year. You have record consumer confidence. It's the highest it's been in 18 years, the lowest U.S. unemployment in 18 years, and 60% of Americans feel that the American economy is good or excellent. So for the most part, I think that's what's going to be driving many of the voters, especially in the Republican primaries. And in the Democratic primaries, again, it'll be who stands the strongest against everything that Donald Trump represents. And I think what'll really be interesting is the degree to which Democratic voters on the single female side come out to vote. They seem to be the ones that are most motivated as a demographic right now to turn out against Donald Trump now and probably in November.
Actually, I want to ask you, John, as a native New Yorker, that race in New York interests me because we have an incumbent there, Governor Cuomo, who in most normal political times you might think would be a candidate against Donald Trump perhaps in 2020, but facing a challenge from a Hollywood actress, Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City, which shows this sort of restive, progressive, one might call leftist side of the Democratic Party. How far do you think that's going to go?
Yeah, that's going to be a fascinating turnout to see. My gut tells me that Governor Cuomo will prevail, but I don't think that's going to be the issue. I think the real issue is going to be what percentage of the vote does Cynthia Nixon get, and what kind of a bellwether is she to Democratic politics around the country. I really think since the 2016 election and the phenomenal success of Bernie Sanders against Hillary Clinton, who, if she didn't have the superdelegates, probably would have lost the Democratic Party nomination to Bernie Sanders. I think there's a real story that hasn't been analyzed yet, and that is how hard Democratic primary politics are being pulled to the hard left, to the progressive left, away from centrism. And you see that really in the defection of laborers, labor union members, and the like, who used to vote for Barack Obama and voted for Donald Trump. So they feel abandoned by the Democratic Party. Can Cynthia Nixon pull out enough voters to to turn out Andrew Cuomo? I doubt it. But I think it's going to be a real scare there. And if I were a Democrat in other parts of the country, I'd be watching New York very closely.
John, I want to step away from those 7 races to talk about the bigger picture of immigration. The House Republicans are expected to bring about to vote tomorrow on that so-called compromise bill. Not a lot of optimism that it will go through. What's your take on where this is going on, if we're going to see any legislation actually getting through Congress that will lay out what is going to happen to all of those migrant families?
I'm somewhat skeptical about where the legislation is going, not so much because of what's happening on the border. That's one tiny slice of this issue. The larger issue really is playing out across the United States, and I think in many Western countries. And that is, do Western countries have borders anymore? And voters want borders. And if we can't have borders, then there's going to be a major push for a wall. but you don't need a wall if you're securing your border. And I think the larger issue is really the debate within the Republican Party as to whether or not there's going to be genuine security along the borders or whether or not there's really going to be more of a SOP, put out the rhetoric, appease Republican voters, but don't really build a wall. And I think Trump is going to be taking this very, very seriously. He knows one of the major reasons he was elected president in 2016 is to build a wall, and that really is symbolic for border security. And what's happening down on the border, let's just be very clear here, this is simply a continuation of Bush and Obama policies. The American media was asleep at the switch. They didn't care when families were being separated and children were being put in protective rooms. And you can call them cages, but that's heated rhetoric. But this is all a Bush and Obama continuation, and Trump actually signed an executive order to reunite families, which neither Bush nor Obama did. So this is not even a partisan issue. It's an anti-Trump issue, and I think most of Trump's supporters see through it.
All right, John, not exactly in terms of the executive order. Those families do not have a clear path to being reunited just yet. That is one of the main things lacking also in a bill that will come into the House. All right, we're going to go out for a quick break. We'll be right back.